Hello, good morning. Welcome to this Logistics Manager webinar sponsored by Locus Robotics. I'm James McLaughlin, Deputy Editor at Logistics Manager, and your host for today's session, which is titled Beyond Traditional Limits, How Flexible Warehouse Automation Drives Unlimited Throughput. The ability of automation to streamline processes within a company is no longer a secret. However, not all automation is created equal. Throughout the course of this webinar, we'll discover how flexible automation enables unlimited throughput and outperforms traditional systems when they reach their limits. Traditional automation solutions often struggle to keep up with dynamic demand and unpredictable peak loads. Fixed infrastructures tend to be inflexible, costly, and unable to adapt effectively to sudden changes in warehouse logistics. This is where flexible automation provides a decisive advantage. To guide us through this topic, I'm joined today by Locus Robotics Business Development Manager, Kane Edwards. He's here to share his insights into how scalable and adaptable systems can ensure unlimited throughput while significantly enhancing efficiency and process reliability. Kane will talk us through how flexible automation works and why it outperforms traditional systems, the benefits of flexible automation during peak periods and seasonal fluctuations, strategies for achieving unlimited throughput and high scalability without rigid infrastructures, and key success factors for efficient implementation and maximum performance. Locus Robotics will be joining us at Intralogistics, the UK's largest intralogistics and warehousing exhibition, at the NEC in Birmingham on the 25th and 26th of March this year. Stay tuned for more on this unmissable event later. And at this point, I'd just like to encourage viewers to ask questions throughout the presentation via the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Please remember to submit your name, job title, and company name when doing so. I'll pose as many of these questions as possible to Kane in the time available following the presentation. Also, a recording of this webinar will soon be made available to view on demand via logisticsmanager.com, so look out for that. And with that, I'll now hand over to Kane to start the presentation section of this webinar.
Thank you, James. I'm going to share my presentation. If you can just give me a yes once you confirm we're up. Bear with me. This one loaded. Sorry, James, can you see the screen here? We okay?
Yeah, it's not full screen, but it's there.
You are in notes view, Kane.
Sorry, say that again. Notes view. There we go. Swap this. There we go. Okay.
Perfect.
Fantastic. Okay. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Again, echo James' sentiment there. I know time is precious, so thanks for taking some of the time today to listen to this webinar. Hopefully, we're going to go through a few topics that will be interesting for you. Appreciate that those on the call here on the webinar will be at different stages in that automation journey. Some of you will have deployed automation, be that fixed or mobile, and some of you might be right at the start of that journey. So I'm going to try and touch on different points that will be useful, insightful, dependent on where you might be in that journey. But we're focusing, as James mentioned, very much on flexible automation and the requirement now kind of moving away from some of those more traditional forms of automation and actually still being able to get maximum throughput from them. As you said, my name's Kane Edwards. I'm Business Development Manager for Locus, based here in the UK, covering UK, Ireland, and other parts of EMEA and APAC as required. We'll mention, but Locus have got a great presence all across North America, EMEA and APAC. So we're supporting customers, multiple different geographies, obviously lots of specific challenges within different regions, and we're able to deploy almost anywhere across the world. And why we're here, as we mentioned, so warehouse automation is evolving rapidly. We're seeing that in terms of actually the different form factors over the last few years that have come onto the market. And, you know, for yourselves, potentially as a warehouse operator, looking at different solutions, it can be sometimes challenging in terms of keeping up with all of those solutions that are available to you. So we're going to discuss that, how to keep up, how to understand, you know, what the most important things to look out for are for you. Equally, why flexibility and scalability are now critical success factors, more so than ever. You know, if we ask the question of if you were to look back in 2018, 2019, would anyone have been able to forecast the events and the trends that would happen over sort of the 6-7 following years to where we are today? I doubt anyone could have predicted a lot of what we've seen. And we say the same thing again, you know, so can we guarantee that we're going to know where we're going to be in 6-7 years from now? And actually, that question mark, potentially some of that uncertainty, leads into the requirement to be able to have a flexible solution that you can scale, adapt, and evolve as the demands and the business requirements that you're looking at will change. And then equally, how do we achieve high throughput without those traditional rigid infrastructure requirements? We said a lot of traditional fixed automation actually just don't tick those boxes for flexibility and scalability, as we mentioned. So if you're looking at needing both elements, you need flexibility and you need high throughput. How can we achieve that with mobile automation? So by the end of the webinar, hopefully, we're going to tick off a few topics here for you. Firstly, we're going to look at why warehouse automation is shifting. I mentioned some of those points then, but over the last decade or so, there's been a huge change, and there will be again in the following decade. So we'll talk about some of those points and equally the commercial models that go in alongside those. After that, we'll look at the power of actually having one integrated ecosystem. It's not just the robot, it's not just the hardware, it's the software and everything else that goes in behind what actually orchestrates and dictates how those robots work. Thirdly, we're going to look at the commercial element, as we mentioned. So it's all well and good having a nice, flexible, scalable robotic solution that you can deploy quickly, but actually you need a commercial model that can be just as rapidly flexible to suit your business as you need it. And then finally, we're going to show you some real world examples and results for Locus customers where we've deployed in different industries, different product types, and still seen some really great examples of throughput and flexible management. Again, James mentioned it, but really important. Seeing is believing. We'll show you a load of videos on here, but actually, there's nothing better than being immersed with the robots and touching and sort of feeling them and being surrounded by them in person. And the best way to do that for sure is to come and see us at some of the exhibitions that are coming up in March. So wherever you might be in the world, there's a few opportunities there. Obviously, for the UK market, as mentioned, we'll be at Intralogistics towards the end of March. So yeah, please do come down, come and see us. We'd be delighted to show you more of a hands-on way in terms of how our solutions work. And again, as James mentioned, please keep this interactive. I'm going to try and give as much information as possible, but I might miss something out. Or if there's a specific question, please put it in the chat. Whichever way works. Connect with me, LinkedIn, if you want to reach out afterwards. But make this as interactive as possible. It's for you guys on the call. Want to make sure that we tick as many of those questions and leave here with a better understanding than we started, hopefully. Okay, so for that first section, why warehouse automation is shifting. We look back to pre-2000s and warehouses generally were very manual, labor-heavy, intensive. Potentially, sort of the birth of conveyors was about as automated as you would get, which, yes, did move the needle. But still, we know with conveyors, there's sort of fixed single points of failure there. They're not particularly flexible or adaptable. It was a really manual-heavy, labor-intensive environment, as we mentioned. We then go into the following decade in terms of the 2000s, 2010s. We started seeing more in terms of ASRS systems, more in terms of shuttles, but that was probably more within the storage element rather than fulfillment. Fulfillment actually still remained quite manual-heavy. And even today, going to a lot of warehouses where, operations are still using trolleys, carts, people, even some with pen and paper applications. They might have implemented scanners, printers to kind of move that information flow, but the material movement still remains quite manual in a lot of places. But the availability now, especially kind of within the last 5 years, especially, a lot of those barriers to entry in terms of barriers to automation have significantly reduced thanks to just the technology being more readily available, being more cost effective, the time to deploy, the understanding. So actually now if you come to those shows that we mentioned, if you Google warehouse automation, there's a host of different options that you could look at. And where we sit in terms of mobile automation, collaborative robots that work alongside people, the technology is evolving so rapidly every year. We're developing new form factors, we're improving the solutions. And that's all being led by consumer demand. We've seen with the e-commerce boom, we'll discuss this in a couple of slides again, the sort of same day, next day Amazon effect model that we talk about. All of these things are pushing more of a requirement for that flexibility and that ability to scale up a solution because we can't see what tomorrow might look like. Okay, so again, when we're talking about traditional automation, we're talking about more of the fixed infrastructure, right? We're talking about conveyors, we're talking about automated storage retrieval systems, we're talking about a high upfront cost and potentially a long deployment time rather than being in kind of single digit months, which you would get with flexible mobile automation. Locus, we can deploy within 3 to 4 months, sometimes less than that. With the much larger, sort of heavier CapEx intensive infrastructure requirements, they can be years to deploy. Naturally, then with big upfront CapEx costs, there's going to be a longer return on investment period. So again, to that point, if you haven't got that visibility of what your business will definitely look like 5, 6, 7 years from now, can you really guarantee that your ROI, if it's going to take 3, 4 years to capture that investment back, and then you still need that time afterwards to actually get the kind of saving and the benefit from it, you're looking a long way ahead there. So that's something that is necessarily a downside for traditional automation in terms of actually that longer period to bed in. You make a decision now. If it takes 18 months to get it up and running, is that still going to be the most suitable solution for you? You can scale up. You can scale up with traditional automation, but again, it's space intensive and time intensive and cost heavy to do that. If you want to move into a new warehouse, yes, you can move some forms of traditional automation, but it's not designed for a new space, right? So that can be very difficult. And in volatile markets, we mentioned with the sort of truly connected world that we live in, a trend can hit in one time zone and that product be sold out before the sun's even risen in another geography. Look at certain products on social media. Trends are so rapid now that you need to be able to scale up and back down again to meet the consumer demands in volatile markets. And flexible mobile automation certainly ticks that box. The only real benefit that we see in terms of traditional fixed automation is if density is your one true criteria, then sure, that's the best way in terms of really dense storage and throughput in that sense. But generally speaking, you can get good density, especially if you're looking at mezzanines or peak towers with mobile robots on that kind of environment. Then you're still getting fairly good density, but actually all the benefits that you can see in green now on the right side. Okay, and what's driving it? We said that we'd come back to this. The UK, focusing on the UK market. So the UK is the largest e-commerce market in Europe with the highest percentage of e-commerce value out of all retail sales. Whatever reason, as Brits like to shop online. But we know that e-commerce is very different to B2B or retail. If you're looking at a direct consumer model, then how you handle that order profile looks very different. You're going to have a much lower units per lines per order, and you don't necessarily get the same visibility. With B2B, with store replay, as we know, you can batch pick a bit easier because you've got visibility of what you're going to be picking for the day or the day ahead. E-commerce, that's going to drop in when it drops in. You need to pick it. Most of the time, you're going to pick it per order, so it's going to be a discrete model. And as that e-commerce trend continues to grow, whilst it's plateaued, it is still increasing. That lends itself more towards the mobile flexible automation that we mentioned. Predictable demand, apologies, with seasonal peaks. So Black Friday a few years ago, go back a decade, wasn't really a thing. Seasonal demand now is hugely notable. There's sites and customers that we have not just a 2x, they have a 3, 4, 5x even increase on their off-peak to peak demands. And a system they've deployed to handle off-peak just cannot cope with that kind of scale. At least with robots, as we mentioned, and we'll talk about the commercial model, just being able to add in additional capacity with additional robots means that you can scale up and scale down to meet that changing demand. And then labor, like why would you look at automation in any sense? Labor is probably, or at least cost is the main factor. Labor shortages in the UK, especially since Brexit, are still being felt. Equally with COVID in terms of a loss of maybe a slightly elderly workforce within the warehouse. So getting hold of, training and retaining good people, good staff is a challenge. You want to provide a nice working environment. Manually, that manually people can walk 15, 18 miles in a shift and pushing and pulling heavy trolleys. It's not a nice place to work. If you're working alongside robots, and our system is a collaborative robot solution, so robots make that job nicer, right? They're taking the burden, the non-value added, the non-productive tasks, the carrying tasks, they're taking that away and letting people just do the productive bits of picking, scanning, and moving on. Rising costs, total cost of operation. is increasing. Real estate in terms of the cost per square meter or square foot in the UK is one of the highest in Europe. So actually expanding or moving into new warehouses isn't always the most cost-effective solution. Minimum wage in terms of that labor again, we all know in April, new government minimum wage is going to be increasing, and so is national insurance contributions at a lower threshold. So pretty much everything is going against warehouse solutions at the moment. Unfortunately, those running DCs, warehouse operations, those costs are just escalating in all areas. So if there's a solution that can bring that down, and that's certainly where we come in, then it's almost a no-brainer. And we talked about it there. 3 recent examples of where that uncertainty, things that we couldn't have predicted, a few years ago, COVID-19, and with that, the natural e-commerce boom of people not being able to go into stores, and that has retained that shift in terms of the stabilization of that level. People weren't sure, is there going to be a return to the high street? We don't know in terms of that trend. And then naturally, I think 50% of major markets had an election last year. There's a huge amount of uncertainty, good and bad, which has a knock-on effect in terms of trade, imports and exports, and volume alongside that. So some really, really obvious examples there of uncertainty that you'll all be feeling, no doubt, and that has a knock-on effect in terms of the way that you manage your operations. And there we go. So for that exact reason, why is flexibility and scalability so important? You can see here, maybe not the best examples in terms of the photos, but before automation, you see people, you see conveyor networks, you see lots of different drop-off points for totes and trolleys. After automation, you're seeing a cleaner environment, robots are running it, it's all efficiently managed, you don't need as many people, you can scale up, you can go across different floors, different environments. That is why it's so important. It gives you the freedom and the flexibility to go in whatever direction you need to meet with those changing demands. And of course, that bottom point, so important, reduce the risk. Risk is the biggest factor in a decision-making process for anyone looking at automation. How can you mitigate as much of that risk of making the wrong decision as possible? No one's got a crystal ball. We don't know what tomorrow will look like, as we say, but reduce the risk with something you can flex, adapt, evolve, that you're not stuck with and waiting a long time to deploy and get that ROI. It's so important that you've got a solution that can evolve with your business. Okay, and that's where Locus comes in, right? So this is kind of the first touch point in terms of Locus Robotics. For those of you that don't know who we are, just talked about the reasons why you might be looking in the market at the moment. Locus Robotics, we've got 2 form factors, and I'll show you in a couple of slides' time. But you see here, we've got Origin, which is a really nimble robot for e-commerce, as we mentioned, equally pharmaceutical, still retail or 3PL applications, where you're picking lighter weight goods. And then we move into Vector, that you can see there. Vector is configurable, but it's for larger payloads, so bigger, bulkier, heavier cases, different use cases, point to point, put away, replenishment. So we're ticking almost all of those boxes now in terms of those movement tasks that happen within a warehouse. And we've got the product that can be configured based on, are you handling totes? Are you picking straight into shipper boxes? Do you want a batch pick, as you mentioned? There's lots of different ways that you, in terms of optimally, can handle your operation. We don't want you to have to change it just to suit Locus. We're going to design the solution to suit what you need. Okay, so that's the hardware, but equally, what tells the robots what to do? And the importance of having that fully integrated automation ecosystem. So what we have at Locus is something called Locus One. And Locus One is essentially the brains behind the solution at Locus. We can integrate with any WMS or warehouse execution system, warehouse control system, whatever's telling the automation what to do, right? So that can be an off the shelf, it could be an in-house. You can go via an integration hub in terms of middleware. We're not touching, at Locus, we're not touching your inventory. You don't need to give over that control. That's something that a lot of people worry about in terms of customer data, or are you going to be touching and handling our inventory? We're not that at all. At Locus, we're a task execution platform. So you're going to give us all of the jobs that you can see in as much sort of frequency as you can give it. So if you've got visibility, as you mentioned, e-commerce is a bit different. Just drop it in as it comes in, give us as much visibility of all of those orders and all of those jobs as possible. And within Locus One, within the brains, we've got a load of algorithms that are going to work out, including priorities and certain parameters to decide what needs to come first. We're then going to work out the most efficient, the most effective way to perform those tasks. And once we've done that, we're going to send them down to the right robot for that job. So you've got the optimal piece of hardware to perform that specific task in the most efficient way. And when we're doing that, we're capturing a load of data in terms of obviously trends, in terms of productivity and when the volume is coming in, when it's being picked, what the most efficient way to run your operation is, how to make sure that people are always alongside robots at the right time. It's really important to understand with Locus that people don't follow the robots. There are solutions in the market where people will do that. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to reduce the non-value added walking time. That's the biggest waste in an operation, especially for a picking and fulfillment operation. That walking between tasks is non-value added, it's wasted. So if you're following a robot, you're not necessarily getting much gain out of that. What we're doing is we're surrounding people with robots. So I pick to one robot, that might go off to the other side of the warehouse. But as a person, I'm going to turn around, and because we can cluster orders, we can cluster robots in a zone, I'm going to have a robot very close to me to be able to perform another productive task very quickly after the last one. So with all of that, we've got all of those insights, we've got all of that data. How do we make that valuable to you within everything that you've paid for? Well, we've got something called Locus Hub. I'm going to show you a video now, but it's giving you all of these dashboards, all of these reports, all of these real-time actionable insights to say, based on what we can see and what we know and using AI, machine learning, we're telling you this is the optimal way, the most efficient way to get through the next few hours using this solution. It takes away the thinking time. It takes away the time to digest what's happened and only being able to look back. We're looking forward and presenting that data for you, as I said, with Locus Hub. And I'll show you a quick video now. Don't worry about the sound on this one. We don't need sound because I want to talk over it. So some of these dashboards said, if you look at it in three ways, we're looking ahead, we're looking during, and we're looking back. Those three time points need different types of data presented in different ways. So looking back, simple reporting, that's what you would have had from your WMS potentially going back for a long time. To be able to look back and say, what happened? Why did that happen? What happened well? What did we learn? What were the trends? Equally, what's happening real time, right? So this one here, exactly this, the glide path. Real time, you want to say, based on our current productivity rates, based on what we can see and what we're doing at the moment, where are we going to get to by X point in the day? And that's where throughput comes in. We know with certain throughput rates, based on certain decisions and how things are happening, what's our cutoff time and are we going to get everything picked? And if not, you can see hours beforehand and make changes exactly here, actionable intelligence in terms of moving people if needed, because we can see in the next hour, there's been a push on a certain product and there's going to be a big density of orders coming within this aisle for this SKU. So actually we can tell you how to manage that before that happens to ensure you hit all of those priority and those cutoff times. So actionable intelligence is really important. It's a huge element of the Locus solution in terms of the robots working well and efficiently, but how we present that back to you as the customer is equally important, and how we manage those assets is just as valuable as how the solution works itself. And you can see there, this can be seen, we have screens in the warehouse, you could be remote, you can have multiple sites. It's really intuitive. You could be sat in a boardroom saying what's happening within our warehouse at the moment. You could be talking with a customer and you can see, okay, where is that order? Is it on a robot? Gives you great visibility, great control over your operation. Okay, and back to how we're deploying that to the right robot. You can see here, there's loads of different configurations that we can put just from those two robots, those two form factors. You can see here in terms of garments, you can see totes, you can see cartons, all sorts, non-conveyables down to tiny little products within pharma industry. We've got a solution that's suitable to you. And as we take that order, we understand based on weights and dimensions and other rules, how to send it to the right robot. So you can have different robots on the same site, all under one platform, and you let Locus control, okay, this is the job, this is the robot that's required. And that versatility is shown here in terms of our customer base at Locus. There isn't one perfect environment for a sort of flexible mobile automation solution like we have at Locus. There's not one perfect environment because we work just as well in a host of environments. So if that's ground floor, if it's within racking, if it's on a pick tower on a mezzanine, if it's picking clothes, if it's technology, again, if it's sort of pharmaceuticals, it's more controlled. You can see here that there's no 100% in terms of it has to be this application. The only thing really is aisle widths based on the robot type. Everything else, we can drop it into a brownfield or we can design it for a greenfield site just as well. Narrow aisle versus wide aisle, there's benefits that come to both. But that's the really important bit. don't have to design your solution to fit Locus. Locus fits around your operation. That's the most important bit to remember. And then what we're going to talk about is the RaaS model, and RaaS being the commercial model, which is called robots as a service. So it's all in a good saying that we can give you different robot types and that you can scale them up. But you're thinking, oh, am I going to end up with loads of different robot types? And, you know, depending on the volume, which ones are we going to use? Well, the beauty of a RaaS model is based on that seasonal demand. As we mentioned, we can add robots in. You have a core fleet, which is year round, and then you can add in different types of robots. So if you say, you know what, for the next 2 or 3 months, because we're in summer, or let's say winter actually is a better example, if we're coming into winter, we know that apparel changes. So customers will start buying bigger, puffy coats, which requires a different handling type than in summer when you've got lighter weight products. So then we can send you just different sort of tote or shelf arrays, different robot types. Maybe it's heavier, so you want vector instead of origins. The beauty of a robots as a service model is that you can flex and adapt and have the right robot for the time of the year, the demand you're seeing, and those trends from customer demands. And to summarize on that point, just really visually shows it nicely here. Everything under that one common execution platform, orchestrating the right robot that's designed for your operation to perform a unique variety of use cases. So you see there, whether it's batch picking or picking to order, case picking, replenishment and put away. If you're integrating with packaging machines or sortation processes, if you're doing inventory counting on the fly, if you're doing point to point, you can use one of the Locus robots to perform those tasks. And then we're presenting the data, as we mentioned with that video, in terms of Locus Hub to show you what's happened, why that was done, and what the efficiency gain was. Okay, so we've just talked about robots as a service. So I'm going to expand on that point. So it's very much a subscription model. So we're moving away from that high CapEx requirement that we saw with, you know, the more CapEx intensive traditional forms of automation. The subscription model allows you to use the robots and cost them more as an OpEx, as you would with people, gives you better visibility through the year in terms of what you're paying for and the ability to scale it up, as you mentioned. And actually all it is, there's a one-time setup fee, which is based on the size of the pick area. That's just the equipment. It's everything that's required to get the robots working and moving. Now, for Locus, we don't need what you might see with other forms of automation. If you've looked at AGVs, other AMRs, or even, you know, conveyors and larger ASRS systems, we don't need, you know, sprinklers. We don't need fire suppression systems. We don't need QR codes in the floor. We don't need you to level the floor out. You know, all those costly requirements that is just a day one to be able to look at other forms of automation. You can just drop Locus robots in. So actually that one-time setup fee is really minimal. It's just essentially the network and the Wi-Fi requirements so that the robots can talk and know where they are in the world. But once you've paid that, the cost savings that you then see generally from reduction in headcount requirements and improvement in throughput. So there's 2 ends of that scale. The cost savings and the increases in revenue that you can see on a monthly basis pays back that one-time setup fee. There's nothing else that you will get. Maintenance is included within that. 24/7 support is included. We mentioned the data, that's all included. The dashboards. As we upgrade those solutions in terms of the software, we'll push those. We'll offer you, the customer, you don't have to pay for it. It'll be pushed and you've got access to that for as long as you're a Locus customer. For the length of that contract, everything is under that one cost of the robot or that upfront cost. So there are no surprises. You've got brilliant visibility. And all of that means that actually we see customers being able to pay back that upfront cost within 8 months. We've had examples, and we'll show some in the final section, where actually they've paid it back in 2 or 3 months, just because that cost saving is so great. And especially if they go live somewhere during peak, when actually that's really maximizing the cost savings. But it's a really simple model. It's really easy to calculate what that ROI might look like. Once we tell you, here's what the future state with Locus looks like in terms of number of robots, number of heads, productivity gain, throughput, if there's an ability to increase. You're saying, okay, here's the future with Locus, that total cost. And then what are we at currently in terms of our current productivity baseline, so the number of heads. We're also including in there, you're including your RF scanners and your guns and the ancillary equipment that is included within Locus. Potentially things like trolleys, carts, even MHE and order pickers. Once you've taken all of those bits out and we've replaced them, we can see, hey, what's the payback? And actually it is very quick. As we mentioned, with with more fixed, rigid, traditional systems, that can be 3-4 years to pay back that initial investment. With Locus, within year one, generally you'll get that payback, and the rest of the term that you're on the contract is just money that you can reinvest in the business elsewhere. Okay, and this is a great illustration in terms of that ability to scale your fleet. There's a real-time example, real customer, e-com fulfillment. You can see phase one, we've started off, we've then scaled up. They've said, yep, the robots are working, let's expand it across the rest of our site. We're going to scale up the number of robots. We've then hit peak, so we're going to add some more robots in on a short-term peak basis. You see that 2 months around the sort of traditional Christmas period. We're then going to drop those peak bots back down. We don't need them now, so we don't want to pay for them. So great, we're going to send them back. You've then got that nice off peak of that core fleet, and then same again, this time, volumes are growing year on year, higher peak. No worries, we'll calculate it with you. We'll add in an additional amount of robots so that you've got the capacity, and you're seeing that trend. Now, that's if there's one peak through the year. Obviously, some businesses will have multiple peaks. There's different ways that we can support you on that, of course. And even actually within the day, within the week, we know that it's not flat. So we've got visibility, we've got tools, so we can give you that flexibility, not just on a yearly annual basis, but actually on a more concise basis as well. We can show you what that day might look like and how many robots you need to hit that design point within the day. And I've just referenced it there in terms of a lot of sites. There's a nervousness with the traditional infrastructure for automation. You can't really do just a phase one at a lighter touch. It's almost kind of big bang or nothing. With Locus, it's really easy just to say, okay, we want to make sure that we're going to see it working in the best way. We want to give the robots the best chance of actually seeing what's the improvement, and we want to get that ROI still. But we've got huge examples of customers that have started within one site or one part of a site or one process. And then once we've seen, yeah, this is working as we expected, gives them that safety. And we said risk mitigation, gives them that safety to say, yeah, we've almost trialed it. We can see it works here. Let's expand it. And we've got tens and tens of examples across the world where customers have started with one site and we're now on multiple sites with them because they've seen the power of that flexible mobile automation. Okay, and then on the final slides, I think I'm okay for time. We're going to wrap up just in here in terms of some real world results and examples. We get this all the time at exhibitions, and rightly so if you're not from the industry. But we get people come up to us and say, oh, these robots, I was in an airport recently, or I was in a restaurant and it's serving me my food and my drinks, whatever it might be. There's a lot of, or in a hospital, for example, or a cleaning robot. Not all robots are powered the same. So don't judge a bot by its cover is really important to say, actually, yeah, you can see a robot that looks somewhat similar, but it's going to add nowhere near the same level of value. And that could be within the same industry as well. You could see a robot as the hardware that looks similar to us at Locus or another solution. But based on what we mentioned back the previous section in terms of that orchestration system, if that software isn't there to actually orchestrate in the most efficient way, which robot, where to be, the most effective and efficient way to perform those tasks, then you're not going to get the value. So no two robots are the same. At Locus, you can see we are tried and tested. We've got 15,000 plus robots out globally being used every day. 10 years worth of data. We've developed the solution over time. We've seen what works, what doesn't work. So that actually, if you come to Locus now, it's not a new technology. We mentioned in terms of the first slides to say where automation has developed over the decades. The beauty here is, yep, the time is right, and we're seeing now the benefits in terms of sort of collaborative robots and that flexible automation. But don't you worry, we've been using robots in customer sites for the last 10 years. So we've been through that learning curve. There's no risk that actually you're going to be a guinea pig, you're going to be learning these things. That's all ironed out. We know we've got the optimal, the most efficient solution, and we're still developing that. We've still got continuous improvement teams to see how can we push it further so that we actually develop those things that are going to be required in a few years' time, rather than waiting for that to happen and then saying, okay, what's the best way to react to that? We're developing the solution ahead of time as much as possible. Some great stats there, as you say. And the one that I really like is you can see the number of customers and then the number of sites. So we've got 325 plus sites globally. It works out about a ratio with about 150 customers of 2 to 1 in terms of customers to sites. So that really emphasizes the point that we've got a lot of customers that have started one site with Locus, and they've expanded to have two, three, four, multiple sites globally, all using Locus because actually, yeah, we've used it, deployed it, we trusted it, we know it works. So why not use it everywhere? And anyway, we get the question a lot in terms of, we mentioned this. So they say, oh, these robots are nice. And is it good if you're at kind of a lower level in terms of a smaller number of robots? It's a nice, alongside. It's really important to say that we've got sites that are operating with 15, 20 robots, or we've got sites that have got up at 800 robots at peak. The benefit just escalates and increases with the number of robots you have, essentially. So where you might, going back a few years, you might have said there's a cutoff where you say, okay, if we've got this volume, we've got this throughput requirement, we're going to transition from something like a Locus, an AMR, into a big, heavy fixed infrastructure solution. Actually, those lines have gone now. You can keep adding robots in. There's a cutoff point, but it's a long way higher than people would think it would be. We've got sites that are handling 150,000 orders within a day. Increase on that in terms of obviously units and lines, with several hundred robots all navigating around themselves and obstacles. So you've got people, you've got trolleys, you've got racking and other infrastructure, dynamic environments, and you've got a lot of robots here that are able just to navigate around all of that seamlessly. And again, emphasizing that point, you can see here globally, these are all customer sites. So we mentioned 120 plus customers. The colored dots are industries, right? So you can see the mix in terms of orange being healthcare. You can see light blue as e-commerce, dark blue is 3PL. You see the pinky purpley color is more industrial applications. So there's not a one size fits all. There's not a one perfect place, as we mentioned. Just for reference, good to know. So Locus, we've got a head office in Boston, the Green Star, and we've got a European head office in Amsterdam. So we can be local, but we've got 24/7 response. So wherever in the world you are, you can pick up the phone and say, hey, here's what we're looking at. Can you help us? And someone's going to be able to help you very quickly. And you'll recognize, I'm sure, no matter what industry you're in, you'll recognize either from a personal or a professional space, a lot of these brands. And that's just that comfort blanket, I think. There's two ways of looking at it here. So you can look at the big companies and say, oh, well, they can afford to make a mistake. Actually, they've got all of these tools, all of these resources, they've got huge demands on them, and they're choosing Locus. But equally, you can look at some of those logos, and they are, smaller, they're smaller operations, and it's so important to them, their investment, and they're still getting just as much benefit out of Locus. So yeah, mix of industries, retail, 3PL, healthcare, whatever it might be, wherever you're coming from, don't think that you're not a good fit or it's not quite right. Come to us. We've probably got a solution somewhere within your industry doing something similar to what you're looking to do. And again, whether you're an entry starter, we asked the question right at the start in terms of saying, are you new to automation? Have you deployed anything yet? Be that just a conveyor, or you've got an ASRS system, you might have had some AGV, whatever it might be. You might be completely new to it, or you might be fully scaled and integrated with, fully conveyed up between multi-floors and sortation systems and automated carton erections and packaging machines. Wherever you fit on that journey, you can see here, Locus can drop in and add just as much benefit. And then that throughput point, you can see here in terms of max scale. So we mentioned, 200,000 order lines in a day being picked with Locus robots, more than 1 million, that's not a word, 1 million square foot or 100,000 square meter sites, depending on your geography. More than 220 lines per hour in productivity, in terms of a personal productivity with the robots. And this is a great example that we show here of fast pick. So this is something, if you're looking at, actually, we've got a SKU that's going to be touched a lot of times. So maybe goods to person would be a better solution, or maybe an automated storage retrieval system would be a better solution. We've got a solution here whereby you've got a really flexible ability to have a dynamic pick phase that you can turn on. You can bring that SKU in, and we surround the SKU with robots. So actually, it outperforms at times goods to person or ASRS, because you can evolve those. You can turn them on, turn them off, those locations. You can bring SKUs in. So great example here is books. So there's a new book coming out. Everybody has ordered something that's including that specific product line. So you can create a temporary location, surround that location with robots, gives you a brilliant throughput, a brilliant productivity. And that's just one example of how we can design the robots to work. So they're not just working in traditional racking. We can tell you, look, here's something we've done elsewhere to hit this kind of throughput, this kind of productivity. and it's really dynamic and it's really flexible. Okay, a couple of examples. I'm going to be really quick, little behind. A couple of examples. So one here in terms of a real Locus customer, a home improvement retailer. They've deployed Locus. You can see here they've tripled their units per hour from a productivity base. They've reduced their mission time by 60%, and they've increased their throughput by 30%, all whilst reducing the headcount requirement by 50%. So you can get your head around that. The number of heads that they had previously, they've managed to reduce that by half. Now, what we're saying here is really important, again, in terms of that change management, that we're not saying that you're going to go and sack half of your workforce. What we see in terms of actually the difficulty in getting and retaining staff is most operations struggle to get to the level that they actually require. So what we're doing is we're bridging that gap in terms of what you need versus what you can get. We're bringing that down. And if there is an excess, so actually if we're saying, yeah, we can reduce it by 50%, so you don't need quite as many people as you've got, you can deploy them somewhere else. And it's really important to think of it that way, because if you can pick or whatever it might be, if you can pick and replenishment a lot, those processes a lot quicker, you want to make sure you don't end up with a bottleneck at a pack station or somewhere up or downstream. So by moving those people, you're actually just increasing your productivity and throughput end to end, rather than just focusing on improving one area. You can move people around. It gives you that flexibility and that freedom to actually manage your operation as you need to. And just another example, this time on an in-house WMS. So again, people think, oh, it's all well and good if we've got an off-the-shelf, a big name. But what if we've kind of got a solution in terms of the warehouse management system that's not quite as powerful? We've developed it in-house. Well, we've got a lot of customers that have done that. They've still integrated with Locus. And look, you can see here, okay, not quite as much, but still they've doubled their productivity, reduced their mission time again, increased that throughput once again in terms of by 25%. And this is a different product type, different SKU, but you're still getting just as much benefit. And a really recent one, a really nice example, in Europe, new customer, the quality group, 250 plus robots. And why this is important, it's e-commerce. They were looking at other solutions, of course, like a lot of you will be, and they settled and chose Locus because it was unmatched for the level of flexibility, greenfield site, unmatched for that level of flexibility and actually handling the high throughput days and those processes. You're getting the best of both worlds there in terms of flexibility and throughput, which, as we mentioned, is most important based on the demands that we're seeing today. And wrapping all of that up, so why Locus? With the robots as a service model, we said it gives you great visibility, reduces your operating cost. You can deploy it within 6 to 8 weeks if it's an existing kind of integration. Let's say 3 months for a new customer, so 12 weeks. You can have robots dropped in to either an existing site or within a completely new design site. Training time as little as 15 minutes. It's so simple, it's so intuitive, because all I'm doing is I'm walking up to a robot. You can see the user interface is on an iPad, and that's presenting all the information. It's telling you what to pick with a photo if you've got it, which is a simple link, where to pick it from. It's got an integrated scanner. You scan the product. It tells you if you've got the right one or the wrong one, the quantity, and where to put it on the robot based on that handling unit. So if you've put that total rate that you can see there, which you can handle up to 16 individual orders, or you could have just one big bin to batch pick, it will present it based on what it's holding on the robot. And actually scaling up and down, as you said, is really simple with that model. Okay, final 2 slides. So really just want to make it as easy as possible just to get your head around it in terms of, is persons to goods suitable for me? And what we'd always say is come to us and ask us, right? We'll support you on that journey because there's a lot of considerations. But looking at it from an operational and a financial point of view. So operationally, ask yourself those questions. Do you need to scale up or down very quickly to keep up with the changing demands of your customers? Do you need to manage multiple third-party logistics tenants? So if you've got a multi-client site, or seasonal demands, as mentioned, so not just one, you might have demands that are a bit harder in terms of those peak to manage with multiple clients, multiple product types. Operationally, question 3, can you adapt without major infrastructure changes or operational disruptions? So that's another one. If you want to scale up those kind of big fixed automation systems, there's a good chance that actually, because you're going to have to make physical infrastructure changes, you're going to have to turn off a part of your site, a part of your operation whilst you expand and make those changes. Can you afford to do that? What's the time that you're not going to be able to use that part of the site while you've got all this equipment, all these people, all of this development happening? Ask yourself those questions. That will help to think, okay, do we need a more flexible solution? And then financially, same questions. Maybe you've got a different hat on. Can you afford that big capex up front? One from a cash flow point of view, one from a risk point of view, one from being able to invest in other areas of the business. Can you afford to have that tied up all up front in a big capex heavy solution? Number two, how confident are you in your mid to long term forecasts? We've mentioned look back, right? 6, 7 years. Who would have predicted what's happened? We don't know what the next 6, 7 years are going to look like. Less than that, we don't know what the next 2 or 3 years are going to look like. So can you bank on waiting 3 years for an ROI or even waiting year to 18 months to actually be able to use that solution because it takes that time to design it and install it? So ask yourself that question. It's really important. Number three, will you still be operating this facility 10 years from now? Again, within that facility, or will it look the same? Do you need to expand it? Do you need to change the way it works, the flows? Do you need to add in mezzanines? Most of you that are in that world will have seen a warehouse move, and it's not easy on its own, moving stock, setting it up. No mind trying to design that around a system that you've already got, which is designed for a different environment, and you're then trying to shoehorn it into a new site. Ask yourself that question. And then finally, can you afford to invest in automation that won't adapt to future needs? Think about lost revenue. If you've got a solution, think about it as a 3PL. We see it all the time. They put a big fixed rigid infrastructure in for one customer. That customer moves on, they pull the contract. As a third-party logistics company, and this goes for other industries as well, you've got a solution that you're then having to find a specific type of customer, specific type of product to fit into that solution. You're losing the ability to go out to majority of the market. It's a needle in a haystack because you're finding someone that will fit into a solution that's designed for someone else. That's really important to ask yourself. Okay, and final slide. Apologies if I've run over a little bit. Where do we go from here? So again, depending on where you're on that journey, please do reach out to us. Come and see us at exhibitions. We can support your teams. It's really important to be consultative. We're not just going to sell you robots and run away. So what we can do, we can support you in that solutions design process. So what are you thinking? What's a perfect world look like? How can we get you there? We can give you masterclasses based on all the different features and the functionalities and the processes that we can look at and how Locus could fit in there. We can deep dive into the WMS, into the integration piece, into all of that material and information flow and how that combines nicely. And we can give you information on the product roadmap. So we mentioned that we've got 2 form factors at the moment. We're constantly developing both from a features and from just a physical product point of view. And again, that gives that point of the robots as a service model. If you go to a customer that says, here's a great, supplier that says, here's a great solution for you. You invest in it. And then a year or 2 later, they bring out an upgraded model. They bring out a new product to market. Think about your iPhone. You go and you spend all of your savings on the latest iPhone. And then a year later, they say, oh, well, we've got a better one now. And actually, we're going to stop supporting that legacy one in a few years' time. But you've bought it. Where are you then? So we can give you that visibility and say, hey, look, don't worry. You've not bought the asset. You're on a robot service model. Here's something that's coming. Is this better for you? Does that work better? We can design it around you. You've got visibility of Locus and our plans, and you can base your decisions around all of that. That's really important. So please do reach out. Obviously, ask any questions. I haven't seen if we've got any questions. But we'd love to speak to you. We'd love to understand your challenges, your opportunities, and whether Locus can support from a flexible automation point of view with getting you there. It's great chatting with you all. James, I'm going to leave you there, but yeah, please do connect on LinkedIn as well. We post some really great content. We'd love to see you on there.
Hey, thank you very much for that excellent presentation. That leads us nicely into the interactive Q&A section of the webinar. For our viewers, now is the time to submit your questions if you haven't done so already. First off, you mentioned, Kane, in your presentation about warehouse management systems. How does Locus integrate with the WMS?
Yeah, really good. So I said we're a task execution platform at Locus. So there's a very simple set of APIs for an API-based system, which essentially is a message type, right? So it's saying order job, order complete. You can build in functionality there in terms of exceptions. So you can, let's say you've got an order that's requiring 5 units of a product. We've picked 4. You're missing that. You're building an API to say, okay, so in this circumstance, what information do you need? So we can then say, all right, we're missing because it was damaged or X, Y, or Z. And all that's doing is just sending a message back to your WMS to say, here's what we've seen, here's what we've done, here's where the products are or the orders are. And that can trigger then whatever you want to happen. So that can trigger a replan process. and we'll design what happens with the robots based on how your WMS needs to work. So it's a really light integration. So we're not holding inventory or anything like that. It's a short process. If anyone's interested in that, we can get our WMS design teams to have a call if there's a specific question.
Great. Thank you, Kane. We've got a question here from Tim asking, what is the minimum starting point for the number of bots you would need to still be effective?
Yeah, really good question. So there's a couple of things that will dictate where that kind of minimum point is. Sorry, excuse me. So one is the size of the pick area. So if you've got I say too small. If you've got a small pick area, you can generally cover that quite easily with 2 or 3 aisles with a person. So it's hard to really get that kind of zoning and that benefit. So what we'd say is we need about 20 to 25,000 square foot as a pick area as a minimum. In terms of a volume, we would say somewhere around 4,000 order lines per day. Now that one's a little bit less fixed because it depends on your units per line and what that order profile looks like, what that pick task time looks like. But you use that as a kind of benchmark. If you've got somewhere around 8 to 10 pickers per day, then we know that we've got enough bandwidth there to kind of reduce that dependency and pay for the robots with the benefit we'll get. And from an operational hours point of view, I mean, the more the better, right? So if you're free shift, if you're double shift, great, because robots can work 22, 23 hours of the day. They don't take days off. So of course, the more you use them, the more benefit you're going to get. But as a minimum, we say, if you've got sort of 7 to 8 hours operationally of picking, then again, we know that the Locus solution can get benefit within there. But again, we can support you on being value based and sort of finding that threshold. Because what we do a lot of the time is say, okay, maybe you're not quite there yet, but if you hit this point, this is when you're really going to get the benefit from it. And we just stay on that journey. We're not trying to hard sell. We're trying to support our customers in making the right decision. So we'll support with those metrics and kind of where you are and where the benefit will come.
Great. Tim also asks, do you have a bot that caters for picking to a pallet?
Yep. Okay. So we mentioned Vector, which is the sort of the larger form factor. So with that, we've got a couple of sites now, which use pallet dollies. So the robot can interact with a pallet dolly that's got a 272 kilogram payload. So in theory, yes, it might not currently be the best solution on the market, but it really depends on, again, what that process looks like, what you need from the robot, what product you're picking. So yes, ask the question if that's a solution that you're looking at requiring, and we can tell you if this is something we think is perfect for you or maybe not. But again, that product roadmap, we can discuss it with you.
Great. I've got another interesting question here, going back to what we're talking about with the WMS. Can Locus handle more than one WMS system on the same site?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's server based, so we can. There's different ways to do it. You can have different endpoints or essentially a different server. We have got examples, yeah, especially within 3PLs, as you mentioned, where they've got multiple clients, want to be on their own WMS. So there's sort of 2, 3 warehouse management systems on the same site. And yep, absolutely. Maybe you lose some of the kind of cross-functionality ability, but actually, we're kind of, again, crossing those lines in the sense that once robots are on site, in the same way that for peak, you can just drop a robot in within 2 or 3 minutes. It's added into that kind of world in terms of the digital map. It knows the WMS that it's talking to. It's just as easy within the same site to kind of flick it between processes or different WMSs. So even if you've got customers with differing requirements through kind of months or yearly processes, that whole fleet can be kind of swapped across if needed. So short answer, yes, different ways to do it. We've got examples. Again, if that's a specific question, please reach out and we'll tell you how that works.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for this morning. I'd like to thank Locus Robotics' Business Development Manager, Kane Edwards, for joining us this morning. I'd also like to thank Locus Robotics for sponsoring today's webinar, which will be available to view on demand soon via logisticsmanager.com in case you'd like to refer back to the presentation or share it with a colleague. As both I and Kane previously mentioned, Locus Robotics will be exhibiting at Intralogistics at the NEC in Birmingham on the 25th and 26th of March. So if you have any further questions or want to see the technology up close, this is the perfect opportunity. This year's event marks the 10th edition of Intralogistics, and this milestone edition promises to be the biggest yet, with more than 350 exhibiting brands, over 60 expert-led conference sessions, and thousands of solutions to streamline logistics and materials handling operations. So that's it. We've reached the end of this webinar. Thank you all for attending today's session. I look forward to hopefully seeing many of you in person at Intralogistics next month. Goodbye.